Everybody. I wanted to share my thoughts on a great heritage legacy artist of 20th century North American music, and that's Gordon Lightfoot. Can't say enough good things about him. And I also have a couple of vinyl records and piano, vocal, guitar books, and a few memorabilia items we'll kind of look at as we go. So I hope you'll consider watching as I share my thoughts on Gordon Lightfoot. Definitely one of the best songwriters I've ever heard in my life.
Sing of islands and an ode to the big blue. Rainy day people and Don Quixote too. Love affairs in winter and upon 8th Avenue and so much more. Sweet Guinevere and lavender and records of old Dan. Tales told in trilogy of continental span. 29 brave sailors perished down to the last man, now they'll live on.
Well, I probably overused the word great. My dad was a writer, and one time when he was reading some of my papers when I was trying to, improve my writing, my dad said, don't overuse the word great. It's a very special word, and I've always remembered that. I still think I use it maybe too much, but great really is a special word, and we should use it sparingly, not just, hey, that was a great hamburger, or hey, that was a great joke you just told or something. But great is, in the classical sense, a very important word, and Gordon Lightfoot deserves that adjective of great. He is a great artist, one of the great figures in North American music of the 20th century, no doubt, and particularly in songwriting, as a performing artist as well. Definitely one of the great voices of music. He had that really rich baritone. I don't mean to speak him in the past tense. I know he's still doing things, but he just had an outstanding voice. And there are an awful lot of songwriters that are great. I like them, but you wouldn't necessarily say their voice per se is great. He's got a great voice and a great songwriter. He also plays a really nice guitar, and a good finger style, good classic folk guitar player, and just an awesome artist, and what a legacy. He was born in Canada, in northern Ontario, but he was born in kind of an mostly English-speaking town in northern Ontario. And I think that Canadian background is so important to his legacy. When you look at so many of these artists, they come from a strong sense of roots. They come from somewhere, like Flannery O'Connor. They're not sort of acultural transplants. So many of them come from a place with history and ties to the place and the ethos of where they were born, and that to me is really. Gordon Lightfoot's just yet another of the examples of like that. He was born in this little town in Ontario, but it sounds like he played sports, and it says he excelled in sports, but he really excelled in music at a young age. And one of the things that I took away from that is the importance of it's music in school and church, because it sounds like school and church, maybe civic groups too, were an important part of his exposure to music and good songs. So he talks about this Ray Williams, who was a choir director at the church he went to when he was a little boy, and how that guy really taught him to sing. And he also did, school programs and talent shows. And my elementary school, we had just a terrific music program, and we sang all the songs of American history. And that sticks with you your whole life, and it gives you, even if you're just singing Yankee Doodle or Red River Valley or, Home on the Range or Goober Peas, all those, they kind of stick with you the rest of your life. And those are classic, time-tested little melodies. Some of them are kind of fun, and if they might be for kids. But they teach you good songs, and not just riffs and scales and things like that, but songs. And he had that background in great songs. I think Stephen Foster was considered one of his biggest influences, or he always credits Stephen Foster, which of course is a giant in North American songwriting. Stephen Foster, no doubt. But I think Gordon Lightfoot learned the lesson of the greats, and rivals the Stephen Foster, anyone else you can name, because Gordon Lightfoot wrote some great songs. But a lot of those songs, when you sing when you're a little kid, I've always thought they're really important as you develop, because they kind of stick with you. And a lot of those songs have kind of little catchy melodies or kind of lyrical hooks and things. And they really teach you about good songs, even if they're just little, twinkle, twinkle, little star type songs or something. They're really important part of the development. It really gives you, and it also gives you a sense of the music of the people, and it kind of connects you into the cultural bonds that music represents between us and the past. And Gordon Lightfoot really has that. Just and it sounds like he was kind of raised singing a lot, and church, school, community events, and that just really stuck with him. And when he started writing his own songs, boy, were they ever good.
Every song a diamond home to fashion something new, yet they sound somehow familiar like a tune you thought you knew. Such a gift of music's only given to a few, like a fine wine.
I think he went to California in his earlier, like as a young man, and he was out there a couple years, but then went back to Toronto, and then he was part of the Toronto music scene in the mid '60s. Another thing I think we should remember about Gordon Lightfoot, he was really a folk artist, kind of like folk revival. Early Morning Rain was done by a bunch of folk artists, including Peter, Paul, and Mary, and the Canadian duo Ian and Sylvia, among others. Elvis, a ton of people have done Early Morning Rain, and what a great song. But that was kind of folk revival stuff. And he also he also was kind of part of the little circle of the Toronto music scene, which was apparently quite vibrant in that period. That included the band, Ronnie Hawkins and the band, and so he kind of was part of that scene. I think that's around the time when he at some point in those years he met Kathy Smith, who was I'm not going to call her a groupie. Some people might, but she was kind of this beautiful woman who would hang around the band and other musicians in Toronto. A lot of kind of legends about Kathy Smith. Of course, she's the woman who held a gun to John Belushi's head and forced him to take hard drugs that killed him. But anyway, Kathy Smith would end up being the person he wrote Sundown about. But she also was associated with Levon Helm from the band, and among others probably. But that Canadian background is really important to Gordon Lightfoot. And like I said, I think that like so many of these great artists, they have a sense of roots. They grow, they develop, they move beyond. But that sense of being rooted in that background, how important is that? And we need to give that to our kids too. A sense of heritage, a sense of history, and music is such an important part of that. And so when I looked at Gordon Lightfoot's background and how he sang in church, probably little town talent shows or whatever, Kiwanis Club, stuff like that. Here now little Gordon Lightfoot's going to come out and sing us a song or something, and that is such a good experience for kids, even if it's kind of little small town stuff. It's you can't put a price on that, and it obviously shaped him for what was to come.
Johnny Mathis sang your songs and even Don McLean. Elvis and the Grateful Dead sang Early Morning Rain. There's something about those songs that keep you coming back again. The list is long.
But Gordon Lightfoot is just such a good songwriter. I've got a couple albums here. The album one of my favorite albums is Sundown, and I wore that out as a kid, and I don't have my copy anymore. And in my collection I might have the Endless Summer, or I don't know, Endless Summer. That's a Beach Boys album. But this is If You Could Read My Mind, Love. This was kind of an early one. I think it was really actually originally called Sit Down, Young Stranger. And then when If You Could Read My Mind, Love became a big hit, they changed it. But I had this still in pretty good shape, probably because my dad kept it in his collection and I didn't drag it all around. But that's the old early 70s copy there. It's a nice one. And it's just got some great ones on there. One of my favorites was always Approaching Lavender. That's such a good song. The Minstrel of the Dawn. What a really, really good song. He's got a version of Me and Bobby McGee on there. Legend has it that Chris Christopherson was involved with that somehow. Cobwebs and Dust, Poor Little Allison. And just a super duper good album. And very folksy. It's basically his little trio, which is Terry Clements and Red Shea. And he played with those guys for years, and there's some other instrumentation added to it. But that was kind of the Canadian period. He had that little trio. They played, I imagine, in a lot of little dumpy bars or wherever they could for a lot of years and kind of built. But that trio was time. They went back together already by this album, and then they would add some other instruments. And Sundown, I'm not going to go through all his albums, but Sundown I always thought was just a super duper good album. But I want to say a little bit about this, Gord's Gold, because this is the album that I would actually recommend. It doesn't have some of the later stuff on it. It doesn't have, for example, at least they might have reissued it, but my old vinyl copies don't have the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald on it. But it does go up to like Rainy Day People's on here, Carefree Highway, and Sundown, which relative to this period, where did this come out in, like 75, 76? Relative to this period was, kind of later, but it has all the earlier music on it. And, once in a while, this you could call Gord's Gold a greatest hits album. But some greatest hits albums are so good that they just calling them a greatest hits album isn't enough. I thought that about John Denver's greatest hits. You can say about, the Eagles' greatest hits is really great. A lot of times, to me, what happens is some of those bands, they have earlier albums, and there might be gems on a lot of those earlier albums. And, maybe they were, when they were first starting out, and when you collected those gems and you put them on one album, you'd have a really, really great album. And so some greatest hits albums are just kind of made to sell, and but some greatest hits albums really are catalog items. And I think the Eagles' greatest hits is kind of like that. I think John Denver's greatest hits is like that. Maybe James Taylor's greatest hits, that was a good one too. There are several greatest hits albums are albums in and of themselves. This might be the best example of all, because this particularly, this is a double album. You can see the inside there. But on album one, they re-recorded a lot of his best songs from the Canadian period in 1975 and did them better. And, they actually did do them better. Now, a lot of people might prefer the old Canadian versions. Like, if you hear, like, Alberta Bound, or, I don't know about, if you hear, like, Cotton Jenny, there's, like, an old kind of Canadian version, which I love. Some people might prefer it. But on these, they kind of redo some of those earlier songs with the really great band, and they had orchestration. And I think they did it in a way that didn't take away from the acoustic, folksy nature of Gordon Lightfoot's music, which is a balancing act for sure, and they didn't screw it up. So this is kind of new and improved versions, I would argue, of his earlier material, some of the gems of his earlier material. Another interesting thing about this, Jim Gordon played the drums on those redos. Great drummer from Derek and the Dominoes, Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs, and Englishmen, played with Eric Clapton and a bunch of other people. But this is the one I would recommend. It's got, but that album one has, I'm Not Saying, Ribbon of Darkness, Songs for a Winter Night. That's a good one. I've been at a lot of coffee house Christmas where people will do that Song for a Winter's Night. Canadian Railroad Trilogy, Softly. I don't have my glasses on. I can't read. For loving me, did she just great? And those are like, did she mention my name? A lot of those are earlier, but they redid them on here, Summer Side of Life, and they're just great. So it doesn't have Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald on it, and The Circle is Small is another nice one. And so that's not on there, but a lot of the really, really good ones. So if you just have one Gordon Lightfoot album to buy, some people might disagree with me, but I might recommend this. And they might have re-released it more with a couple of those other ones on CD or some of the ones you can get now. But the vinyl went right up to like Rainy Day People. But just what great songs. I've also got these two songbooks here. But anyway, these are nice. You get a lot of pictures, and all the music. One thing about a lot of that guitar music, when I was a kid, I would buy that. And of course, you're trying to translate guitar to piano, and that doesn't always work too well. So there's a lesson there somewhere where if you want to learn to play guitar, they'd write it all out in piano, and sometimes you also have capos. Gordon Lightfoot used the capo a lot, so the translation from piano to guitar wasn't always good, but you'd get the chords and the words and all the verse goes here and things like that. So these were definitely worth having. I feel like I don't see too many of these piano vocal guitar books anymore, and if I do, they tend to be kind of almost like novelty items or something. Guitar Center has a few, but these used to be just almost every artist would have major parts of their catalog in these books, maybe everything they did in these piano vocal guitar books. But this is a nice one.
The watchman's out again in somewhere USA. Out on the carefree highway, there's always somewhere new to play. It's such an easy feeling, don't want to let it slip away on you. Gordon Lightfoot, born in North Ontario. He sang for schools and churches, that's how his song did grow. He sang in every bar across that big old land of snow. Hats off to you. Hats off to you. Hats off to you. Hats off to you. Hats off to you.
So, but a couple things, I think he is a very good guitar player. I think for years he played with that Red Shea. I think he had another guy named Terry Clements for a while, and Rick Haynes on bass. But Gordon Lightfoot himself he's kind of like a lot of those folk artists from the 60s. He was a really good kind of singer-songwriter guitar player, could play a song right and kind of hold it together. So you need someone like that. If you got all these great players but no one really knows the song, you need someone that kind of plays the song, plays it good solid, and maybe finger picks when you need to finger pick, or picks and strums and puts the verses in at the right time, puts the feeling in, puts the dynamics in. And that is what he was. And he's actually a good guitar player, and definitely a great songwriter. One interesting thing is he uses capos a lot. And I always thought that's kind of interesting, because when I was a kid, I had a 7th grade I took about 10 guitar lessons in the 7th grade. And at one point, the teacher told me capos are for cheaters. And yeah, I think he was kind of kidding, but I always remembered that. But, Gordon Lightfoot, he uses capos. And an interesting thing about that is he sticks those songs in the keys they sound good on guitar. But also he uses a capo to adjust that to his voice. And I think if you listen to some bands where you get a great guitar part oh man, this guitar part sounds great, and then you just start singing away, and it might not be in a great key for your voice. And if you look at groups that are really organized around a great singer, a lot of Nashville they might do it in F sharp or B or whatever, keys that you would consider kind of off, and they use capos to do that. But it makes the vocals just perfect. You find that perfect key where your voice is dead on. It lays just right for your voice. So he's a guy that uses capos, I think, at least sometimes, a lot of those songs. But they always lay just right for his voice, and that's so important. And I think we can all think of singers that maybe do have good voices, but they just kind of sing, and maybe if they changed the key or something, they'd find a better lay for their voice. But his songs are always just exactly where they need to be for that awesome voice he has. Another thing, I think he is one of the great examples of why the acoustic guitar is such an important instrument, because it's so evocative, and his songs are so expressive. The acoustic guitar is a great vehicle for expressing feelings like love or sadness or kind of bittersweet, feelings or whatever, being hungover, whatever. The guitar is such a powerful enhancer of human expression. Right up there with the piano. I don't know. I guess any musical instrument really is, but the guitar, because it syncs up with the voice so well. And he just epitomized that. You listen to some of those albums he did in the 70s, and it's just that symbiotic relationship between the guitar and the voice, almost like one thing. They become one. So some of his love songs and breakup songs, like "If You Could Read My Mind, Love," but they just connect the feelings in the words, which his lyrics are always really good, but the guitar would just bring out all those dimensions of feelings and emotions, and he really just captured that. The other thing is, I heard him say this in an interview once. A lot of his best songs, he thinks, were always kind of like of the "If You Could Read My Mind, Love" or "Affair on 8th Avenue" variety. And some of his record company people would tell him to be very intentional about writing upbeat songs. So he would write nice upbeat songs, which is probably a good call. So I always think of like Cotton Ginny, Alberta Bound, I don't know, just did she, and just kind of good toe tappers. You need Old Dan's records, some of those too. And that's good. That's the discipline of songwriting. The other thing about his songwriting is he not only wrote about feelings and things like love or women but he was also very topical, and I think that's neat, and I think that's something that really is going to be around for a long time, is his legacy of storytelling. Of course, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, or a lot of those songs, like Old Dan's records. I don't know who Old Dan was. I'm sure some of you out there do, but it's like you're singing about some old guy you probably knew when you were a kid or whatever. Sort of the storytelling aspect of songs. Also geography. There's like Canadian and Great Lakes geography, and in a lot of his songs, and I think that really adds a dimension to his music that makes it really timeless. People be listening to some of those songs. I think the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, I remember reading this years ago that he said this, and there was a little blurb. It was either in Time or Newsweek, like "This Week in the News" or whatever, in the back of the magazine said the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald sank in November of, was it 75 or whatever, 76. I hope I don't get that date wrong. And 29 men died, and he said, people will remember that about 5 minutes, and he wrote that song, and now it's one of the most famous shipwreck tragedies of world history, and just shows you the power of a song. And he's got other songs that are topical like that. I guess the Canadian Railroad Trilogy, it's amazing. He tells the story of the Transcontinental Railroad of Canada. Of course, in America, we have our Transcontinental Railroad with, and he has kind of the Canadian version of it. And he's got other songs like the Seven Islands Suite. It's kind of geography and just really interesting, kind of smart man, very, I would say kind of intellectual, but not but intellect coupled with wisdom and feelings and creativity and just an outstanding artist. So when I say he was great, I mean it. I'm not just saying he's great like, this pizza's great tonight or, but I mean, he's a great artist. He still performs. I think he's coming to Atlanta and I'd like to go see him. I did see him in 2017 and a place was packed. His voice, his voice is not like it was, 30 years ago or whatever. That might be a result of some of the medical issues he's had. I know he had Bell's palsy and at one point was declared dead by a radio station, and it's kind of a great story there. But and I don't know, but his voice sounds different. But I was just so glad to see him, And if anyone had anything to say about it, I thought you're saying it's a treat. You're seeing someone who wrote some of the great songs of the 1900s right here. I mean, so he was doing Carefree Highway, Sundown. Did She Mention My Name? Rainy Day People to me is like a perfect little song. Perfect. Like, Plato talked about the ideal. Rainy Day People is just one of those simple little perfect songs. And when you hear it, you go, God, it's just so simple and nice. And then you think, why the hell couldn't I have thought of that if it's so simple? And it's just like a simple, perfect little song, Rainy Day People. And he's got several like that. But he did those, and I was so glad to see him. And I wish him all the best, of course. But I think he's still touring. He's got some 22 dates, and I think that's terrific. So hats off to Gordon Lightfoot. Definitely one of the great artists, and can't say enough good things about him. Got these books here. I you know what? If this one is actually pretty good. It's kind of biography, and so. Well, thanks. God bless. Hats off to Gordon Lightfoot.